Hola, clase. Hoy vamos a estudiar los verbos irregulares del pretérito. Today, we're specifically going to be studying stem changers in the preterite tense, all right? So those are a type of irregular verb in the preterite tense. They don't follow the regular rules of the preterite tense and the way that those verbs change, all right? So we're gonna study those. Now, I have to warn you that preterite tense stem changers do not work exactly the same way as present tense stem changers do, which we've already learned about present tense stem changers, right? Like yo quiero un pastel or tú tienes tres hermanos, right? Those are just some of the present tense stem changers that we learned. And we can use those stem changers in the preterite tense as well when we're talking about things that happened in the past, but we just use them slightly differently, all right? So real quick on the next slide, we're gonna review maybe one or two verbs in the present tense that are stem changers, and then that way you'll kind of be set up and ready to start learning about stem changers in the preterite tense or in the past tense. All right, so like I said, we're going to go ahead and conjugate two of our present tense stem changers. So we're going to conjugate them in the present tense just as a reminder. Okay, so let's do dormir, which if you will remember means to sleep. Think like dormant or dormitory. All right, and in the present tense, if we were going to change this, we would change the O to a UE, right? So we would do duermo, duermes, duerme. And then in the nosotros form, remember we don't change the O, so it'd be dormimos. And then we change it here, so duermen, okay? So, for the most part, the endings are always gonna be the regular endings in the present tense. We just want to change the O to a UE in all of the boot, okay? So the nosotros form, we don't change because it is not in the boot. So then let's look at another verb, preferir. Preferir, which means to prefer. And in the present tense, all of our verbs work the same way, right? Except there's different types. So preferir is a stem changer, but it's an E to IE stem changer. So in the yo form, it's prefiero. And then here we have prefieres, prefiere. In the nosotros form, just like with dormir, we don't change it. Preferimos. And then here in the ellos, ustedes form, we do change it. Prefieren, right? And so we end up having our endings, the O, S, A, imos, N, they're all the same, but we do change that E to an IE in the boot, and we leave the nosotros form alone. Okay, so that's how our present tense stem changers work. We have ER, AR, and IR stem changers in the present tense. And we have the four different categories of stem changers, right? We have O to UE, we have E to IE, we have E to I, and then we also have the U to UE, like the verb jugar. So now let's take a look at how stem changers behave in the preterite tense. All right, so the good news is that preterite stem changers are actually simpler than present tense stem changers. So only IR stem changer will take a stem change in the preterite tense. All right, so if a verb ends in IR, like morir, then it will take a stem change in the preterite tense. However, if a verb ends in an AR, like empezar, or if it ends in an ER, like querer, they won't take a stem change like they did in the present tense. Now, they might be irregular in another way. Querer, we know, is an irregular verb, right? And empezar is also a cargar zar verb. but they won't take the same type of stem change that they did in the present tense, okay? We just don't treat them as stem changers anymore. We act like they're not stem changers when we're using them in the past tense. But IR verbs, we still treat those verbs like they are stem changers when we use them in the preterite tense. Preterite tense stem changers are simpler again because there are only two types of stem changes that can happen in the preterite tense. We can only change an E to an I and an O to a U, all right? So we can't change an E to an IE. If we used to change the E to an IE, now we're just only allowed to change it from an E to an I. So those two categories, E to IE, and the E to I, they just become one category. And now we can only change that E to an I, all right? And then the other one, O to U, we're only allowed to do that. We cannot change U to UE, and we also can't change O to UE, okay? So we just get rid of both of those completely. And now we can just only change the O to U. All right, so I'm going to take a while on this slide because I want to make sure that I explain it really well to you, okay? So the first thing that I want to point out, these are E to I verbs that happen in the preterite tense, okay? And there's a list of them over here on the right-hand side. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 7 of these, all right? These are the 7 that you need to know this year, okay? And you should know what they mean as well. So pedir means to ask for. Competir means to compete. Preferir means to prefer. Repetir is to repeat. Servir is to serve. Sentir is to feel. And mentir is to lie, right? And you'll notice that all of these verbs end in an IR because remember, again, only IR, verbs that end in IR, can have a stem change in the preterite tense, right? And most of these you've already seen before in the present tense. So as far as their meanings go, that shouldn't be too hard to learn the meanings of these verbs, okay? And you will also notice that I underlined the E in all of these that changes, okay? And that E can only change to an I, all right? So now let's look at one specific verb, the verb preferir, which means to prefer. Okay, we're going to look at it right here, and we're going to conjugate it in the preterite tense. So the first thing that I want to point out to you is that stem changers, they take the regular endings. Okay, so that's at least simple, right? So since it's an IR verb, it ends in E, iste, io, imos, and ieran. Okay, ieran. And so that makes it really simple. You don't have to worry about that. The next thing that I want to point out to you is that in the preterite tense, stem changers, they don't change in the boot. Remember in the present tense, they used to just change in the boot and they did not change in the nosotros form. Well, now they actually, stem changers, they don't change in the yo form, they don't change in the to form, and they don't change in the nosotros form. I'm going to use a different color here to underline and show you that. Okay, so in the yo form, the E does not change. In the to form, the E does not change. And in the nosotros form, the E does not change. Okay, that means that it only changes in 2 spots. It changes from an E to I. I don't know if you can see that yellow very well. It changes from an E to an I in the el, ella, usted form, and then it also changes from an E to an I in the ellos, ellas, ustedes form, right there, okay? So you end up with preferí, preferiste, prefirió, preferimos, prefirieron, okay? And you'll notice then that it only changes where I have it, the subjects highlighted in it, right? The el, ella, usted form and the ellos, ellas, ustedes forms. Seriously, you guys, it doesn't get any easier than this. So for O to U verbs for this category, we're only going to learn 2 verbs, all right? So we're going to learn the verb morir, which is to die, and dormir, which is to sleep. And each of those, I underlined the O in those, although that should be pretty obvious because there's only one O in those. And so it's not like you got to guess which one needs to change. And remember that that O can only change to a U. So when we learned these verbs in the present tense, the O changed to a UE. But in the preterite tense, they only change from an O to a U. So let's take the verb morir, to die, right? That's very morbid. But let's take that verb and conjugate it. So again, it is a verb that ends in IR. So it is always going to have these endings, I, iste, io, imos, hieran. All right. And then, like I said, with another caller, I'm going to go back and show you that in the yo form, the to form, and the nosotros form, we do not change the O to a U. Okay. We do not change that O to a U, but I'll use a green this time. In the ea usted form, we do change the O to a U. And also in the ellos ustedes form, we change the O to a U. So we end up with mori, moriste, murió, morimos, and morieran. All right. So just be looking for that change that happens in the ea usted form and the ellos ustedes forms. The rest of the verb really is regular. It's a regular verb in the yo form, in the to form, in the nosotros form. It's a regular verb in the preterite tense. All you have to do is just take off the IR and add the correct ending, okay? In the other spots, you literally only have to change one letter. You just change the O to a U, and you change that in those two spots, all right? All right, so I want to show you how to conjugate the verb repetir just for some practice so that you can see how easy it is to conjugate in it in all 5 forms. So repetir means to repeat. Let's go ahead. In the yo form, you're going to leave the stem change alone, okay? Then you're just going to put your regular ending on it. So repeti. In the to form, you also don't have to worry about doing the stem change. So you just do repetiste, you add the iste onto the end. For the next form, you do need to do the ea usted form. You need to do the stem change. So you change that E to an I, but then you just add your regular ending on it, repitió. For the nosotros form, you do not change, repetimos. Then for the ellos ustedes form, you do change the E to an I, and then you add your regular ending onto it. So repitieran, right? So that's your first verb. For the verb dormir, we'll go ahead and conjugate this one out in all of the 5 forms. So for the first one, the yo form, we do not change the O. We just add, we take off the IR and we add our regular ending for the yo form dormi. So yo dormi. For the to form, again, we don't change the O. We just add a regular ending iste. So tú dormiste, you slept. Ayer tú dormiste. Then for the ea usted form, we do change the O to a U. We add a regular IO ending on, dormió. Nosotros form never has a stem change. That doesn't change from the present tense to the preterite tense, dormimos. And then the ellos ustedes form, we do change, sorry, that's him, dormieran. Dormieran, we do change the O to a U there, but we add the regular ending on it. So there you guys go. We'll practice these more in class, and I hope you'll be able to get used to the way that stem changers work in the preterite tense really fast.